most powerful invasion air force ever launched. Some of the 11,000 planes that opened the path through the so-called impregnable Atlantic Wall. Yank paratroopers received last-minute instructions before taking off for the invasion coast 100 miles across the English Channel. These are the heroes who established first contact with the enemy. The Coast Guard, the Navy, the Air Forces land hundreds of thousands of British, Canadians, and Yanks on Hitler's doorstep within a few days. The cost of our initial landing was but a fraction of what our leaders expected. More than 10,000 German prisoners were captured in the first few days of the battle. Let these pictures remind us that there's still a long road ahead to Berlin. Buy that extra bond today.
We dedicate a monument to the leadership of noble men.
We reflect on the proud history of the heroic men that served here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Richard D. Winters Leadership Monument recognizing all those who led the way on D-Day.
My name is Damian Lewis. In the year 2000, young Richard Winters' mind about parachuting out of airplanes, commanding men in battle, or future monuments honoring leadership. But there was one skill already being taught at home by his parents Richard and Edith that would prove useful later on in shaping Dick Winters as a combat soldier.
My upbringing, I had the strict discipline that follows the Mennonite group. As you look back now, you appreciate it. At the time, it just made you a little bit different than the other fellows. If we look at Eisenhower, who wasn't too bad a leader in the World War II, do you realize his parents were Mennonite?
A business degree from nearby Franklin and Marshall College was a safe and sensible plan of action for Richard Winters. In Lancaster County, in the late 1930s, there were signs that the Great Depression was finally subsiding, and prospects for work across southeastern Pennsylvania were improving. But there were also rumblings of war coming from Europe and the Far East, so in 1940, in preparation, the United States established a military draft. Dick Winters didn't think twice about joining the service right after he graduated from college in June of 1941, but not because he always wanted to be a soldier.
I made a decision, look, I'm going to volunteer, take care of this military obligation, and then when I have that taken care of, then go get a job. Then I don't have to worry about interrupting my livelihood.
December 7th.
What I overlooked was the fact that in December we had Pearl Harbor. So then you're in for the duration. The advantage was I had my basic training completed, and I had found out how to live in the Army. Some of the fellows from Lancaster, for example, who came into the Army after Pearl Harbor, here I was an officer by that time, and I was putting them through basic training. And that gives you a challenge on leadership.
Without giving it much thought, Richard Winters had displayed other important characteristics of leadership. A good leader needs to be able to think ahead, anticipate a situation, and make a decision based on the best information available. All of which also played into Dick Winters' decision to give something new called the Airborne Paratroops a try.
Went to Fort Benning, Georgia for officers training school. That's where they qualified the paratroopers. So each day, as you're going from class to class, or through your training there at OCS, you saw the paratroopers, and they're going through their basic training. Every place they moved on the double. They were all good-looking, husky young men, and they would sing their songs, the marching songs, as they were moving along. I looked at them and I thought, that's the kind of fellas I want to go to combat with. You're going to go to war. I want to go with the best. And that is the best-looking men, troops that I've seen. Just a few months earlier, when I went in the Army, I was making $21 a month. We used to refer to it as $21 a day, once a month. You don't do much with $21 a month, but my goodness, here are these fellas are making $100 a month more. When they pay you $100 a month to be a paratrooper, to jump behind the lines, that is blood money. You earn it.
Long before he started to earn that extra pay in battle, there was physical training at Camp Toccoa, Georgia, beginning in the summer of 1942. That's where 2nd Lieutenant Richard D. Winters joined Easy Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment and was introduced to his new company commander, First Lieutenant Herbert M. Sobel, who had his own distinct leadership style.
He stepped over the line. With his discipline, it was unfair, and it became unbearable. And it just wasn't with one man. He didn't pick on anybody. He picked on everybody. Officers, enlisted men. For example, in inspecting the troops, this idea of if he couldn't find anything wrong with your rifle or your uniform or so forth, he would look at your ears and say, dirty ears. It was just unreasonable. And so that what the men had in common was that they resented that. There were weekends, for example, that we might go together to go to town or something like that. And he had a good sense of humor. And he was okay. He had been born and raised in Chicago, so he was completely lost. If you were out in the field, he couldn't read a map. Why, I don't know. He could learn to read a map. He never did learn. He was constantly lost. And he was ill at ease with himself. And he was doing dumb things, trying to be a leader.
At Toccoa, Richard Winters became Easy Company's top junior officer and was promoted to first lieutenant.
The first example you must set is that you must spend your time with the men. Going back to Sobel here for a minute, time after time, he had some excuse, some reason for turning the company over to me. You have to work with the men. And by working with the men, they get to know you. And if you do a good job, that's how you say, follow me.
Despite his very strong bond with the enlisted men in Easy, Dick Winters believed in that old Army creed that the relationship between officers and the men they lead had to be different.
At no point can an officer feel that he's as close and has bonded as the men have who have lived together night and day when the chips are down. You're set aside, you're just a bit different. You're close, they know you and respect you and they'll follow you, but you're just a bit, you're set off on a different notch in the society of the Army, of the military.
In the shadow of Currahee Mountain is where Dick Winters learned that being a strong leader also meant being able to rely on others to help get the job done. That included fellow soldiers who had vastly different strengths and weaknesses than his own. Training for war brought people together at Toccoa. Some were educated, some not. Many came from big cities, others from small towns. In the case of Dick Winters, a Mennonite from Pennsylvania Dutch country who didn't drink, smoke, or swear, his closest alliance from Toccoa through World War II was with fellow Lieutenant Lewis Nixon, an alcoholic and frequent cusser raised in New York City.
I was reminded by my friend Nixon at one point. He said, I pity you. He was the alcoholic. He said, you know, when you get up in the morning, that's as good as you're going to feel all day. With me, when he drank all day, he feels better as the day goes along. I took care of the problems and the leadership and the running of the thing during the daytime, and Nixon took care of patrolling the lines and seeing that everybody's on the job at nighttime when he was functioning at his peak of efficiency. So the two of us worked together just beautiful.
Dick Winters also knew Easy Company would need to develop good non-commissioned officers, or NCOs. Corporals and sergeants who would become leaders themselves and be the glue that held the enlisted men together.
Well, as time goes along and you get in training, and the ones that are the smartest, the ones that are good, the ones that can be leaders are then shifted around. The ability of each man will come out during training.
For sculptor Stephen Spears, leadership is more than just a word. It's a visual representation of a man's ability to be out front. It's not just about giving an order to your men. It's also about being the man who leads the way once the mission is defined. Capturing that moment in a bronze monument is essential, or, as I found out myself with the cameras rolling, very challenging, especially when portraying a man with such a commanding presence. As Spears sketched out some early ideas for the design of the Richard D. Winters Leadership Monument, he knew full well this statue must display confidence and do justice to a soldier who always led his men from the front. Spears was also aware that the pedestal the statue would sit on would need to represent many other men of the United States Army who led their own soldiers with great initiative and courage on June 6, 1944.
I think a good leader is a man who knows what has to be done and sets about to do it. But he also has to know about the people that he's got to do it with.
If you're not liking a guy and you know he's got the ability to lead you, you don't care whether you like him or dislike him. First of all, guts.
Guts.
Second of all, brains.
Guts, a lot of guts.
If you ain't got the brains, you don't belong there.
A lot of guts.
Because you're going to take men with you when he gets killed.
You don't want them to, you want to take no men, no matter if they hate you or not. You want to get them in alive and get them out alive.
You got to look up to the guy and like him. If you don't look up to him and like him, you're not going to go with him. And then everybody tells you any different. They're talking through their hat.
I think being honest with the guys, telling them exactly what to expect and what to do, and the fact that they respect you as a person. You have to be respected as a person, or you'd never be a good leader.
That's just the way it is. They seem to go ahead of the class, take over. The men seem to respect them. They might be a little older.
I think the general rule with the military is they don't lead from the front. But some of ours did, and I respected them a lot more than I did the one that followed.
Set an example. Let them follow you, so that when you give an order, they don't hesitate. Is it a good order? How far do I want to go with this? The action is immediate. And in combat, that is the difference between winning and losing. It's the guy that gets the first shot off, the guy that does it right, and the guy that has everybody thinking in the same way immediately. That's a difference in battle right there. And it's obvious. Get the first shot off and make it a good one.
Soldiers are fully aware that a good officer gives them a better chance of staying alive. They also know a lousy one gets guys killed. Easy Company men say it wasn't hard to recognize a bad leader.
One that was interested in their own objectives only and not caring what happens to the people around them as long as they accomplish their goals, or not being able to meet a situation that demanded some insight into the seriousness of it and how to get about solving the problems.
And if you had an officer that couldn't handle it, you read it, you've seen it, you know it. And that's what you couldn't follow.
In England, in the weeks prior to D-Day, Dick Winters lived here, on the second floor of this store in Aldbourne. The shop was owned by a friendly English family named Barnes. Richard Winters' peaceful life was about to change, however, as he and thousands of other American paratroopers left England on the night of June 5th, jumping into Normandy, France, in the early morning hours of June 6th. On D-Day, First Lieutenant Richard D. Winters of the 101st Airborne Division found himself acting commander of Easy Company, 2nd Battalion of the 506th. There was no doubt he was mentally and physically ready for the job. Some of that thanks to his training experiences with Captain Sobel, but mostly because of Dick Winters' own intrinsic leadership capabilities.
In civilian life, it's the same way. Know your job. That way, when it comes time for a decision to be made, there's no question that the folks have faith in you.
Herbert Sobel had been replaced as E Company commander by Lieutenant Thomas Meehan prior to the Normandy jump. But Meehan's plane was missing on D-Day, and 4 German 105mm guns, pounding the 4th Infantry Division landing at Utah Beach 3 miles away, needed to be silenced. The firing towards Causeway No. 2 at Utah was coming from along a hedgerow near a farmhouse called Brécourt Manor. Brécourt was a little less than 2 miles north of the village of Saint-Marie-du-Mont. 14 2nd Battalion soldiers, including 12 from Easy Company, such as Wild Bill Garnier, Don Malarkey, Carwood Lipton, and Buck Compton, were assigned the mission of taking out the heavily camouflaged guns at Brécourt. The cannons were guarded by 50 Germans. Dick Winters would lead the men as the acting commander of Easy. It was just after 7 a.m. in Normandy on D-Day.
If they respect you and trust you, that's about all you can ask, and but it's got to be earned.
Brécourt Manor hasn't changed much since that day in 1944. The locations of the 4 German guns in a trench along this hedgerow were filled in long ago. Cows still graze in the field where First Lieutenant Dick Winters led soldiers on a pivotal mission on D-Day. The legend of which lives on thanks in part to words in a book and images from a television series I was part of, which recall the story but cannot fully convey the anxiety and adrenaline of entering combat for the first time.
When I was called up to headquarters and I had to take out those guns, the first thing I did was go off by myself, crawl out this one hedgerow to scout it out. Came back and I gave my orders. With Compton, you go up this hedgerow and I'll go up this hedgerow. So that if we do get pinned down, we both won't be pinned down at the same time. And we got everybody together, set up the 2 machine guns we had to lay down a base affair, and had Compton, Popeye, Wynn, and Malarkey go out there and try to put some hand grenades on them, so that with the instructions, as soon as you throw those hand grenades, we'll all charge. Which we did, and we were fortunate enough to get in there as those hand grenades are going off, and we got on top of them.
They all eventually ran out of ammunition, and that's why we pulled out of here. And when we ran out of ammunition, why it was then it was Ronald Spears that captured that, knocked out the 4th gun.
Brécourt Manor and its surrounding fields have been owned for centuries by the de Valavier family. Today, Charles de Valavier still runs the dairy farm. On June 6, 1944, Charles' father, Michel, then 24 years old, Michel's brother Louis, who was 19, and their parents were huddled in the manor as the early hours of the D-Day invasion began. The Germans who lived on the farm were in a panic.
There was many alarms. The Germans were very nervous. It was a very agitated night and very hard night. My grandfather knew what was happening, and he realized that the civilians probably didn't know what was going on.
Charles de Valavier's grandfather, Colonel de Valavier, was all too familiar with the reality of war, having been wounded himself 3 times in World War I. World War II had already cost the de Valavier family 2 sons, both killed in 1940 when Germany invaded France. Charles de Valavier's grandfather sensed the Germans' anxiety on June 6, 1944 was justified.
Il y avait les deux à la fois. Well, both at the same time, there was the experience of World War I and this agitation. He said something was going on, something was going down.
Parce que mon grand-père était un officier.
My grandfather was a officer of the First World War, and he lost both of his sons in the Battle of France. And the Germans were here at Brécourt, so they had respect for the French who fought in World War I. It might appear strange, but that was the reality.
The area of the German gun battery at Brécourt was strictly off limits to the de Valavier family prior to D-Day.
Non, mais c'est aussi l'expérience de la guerre de mon grand-père.
Well, it's also my grandfather's experience, which he would not allow his children or anybody from his family to be part of this battle. He absolutely wanted to have his family stick together, to be as close as possible and as far away from the battle as possible.
As history tells us, First Lieutenant Richard Winters led the men in textbook fashion, and the 4 guns at Brécourt Manor were destroyed by 11 a.m., saving countless American lives at Utah Beach. For his leadership on D-Day at Brécourt, Richard D. Winters was recommended for the Congressional Medal of Honor and was eventually awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the 2nd highest military decoration awarded to a member of the United States Army.
I call him a Quaker.
Right.
True. No, I'm from Pennsylvania. If you're not from Pennsylvania, you don't know what I'm talking about. The Quakers and the Mennonites did not want to serve in the war. They're going to service without getting to combat. It's their religion. Fine. Winters, holy Christ, right free, we're all going to get killed. He's a Quaker, which is true, but he's the best man we ever had. Even though I called him a Quaker, he said, when you wrote a book, he says he's a Mennonite, he's not a Quaker, which is fine. There's no malice intended for that, no malice intended.
Dans une première interview télévisée.
He explains it in a very early interview, when I was only 7 years old, that everybody must pay his price for liberty.
Richard Winters looked the part of a leader at Brécourt Manor on D-Day. He was handsome, well-trained, in control, and fearless. Any monument recognizing his and the contributions of other courageous leaders who fought here in France on June 6, 1944, would need to convey this. This statue, in particular, needed to demonstrate the focus and determination of a man in battle who was in total command of those he led and the environment in which he fought. As sketches turned into clay models and then bronze, sculptor Stephen Spears pored over World War II photos of his subject. He kept going back to Dick Winters' facial features.
The high cheekbones, the rock-solid jaw. Who better to sculpt for something like that? He really portrays that power and that strength. So I was thrilled to be able to sculpt someone like that.
As Easy Company moved through the war, from France to Holland and into Belgium, then Germany itself, the leadership abilities of Richard D. Winters earned him several promotions. From first lieutenant and acting leader of E Company on D-Day to the rank of major and commanding officer of the entire 2nd Battalion of the 506 by war's end in 1945.
Dick Winters was a great leader. I don't think he had an enemy. I think even the Germans must have liked him. But he was a great leader, and everything he did was right. He always, all his decisions were right. He made very few bad mistakes.
Richard D. Winters had proven his abilities to lead men in combat. The words, "hang tough," became a frequent E Company saying, used by many of the men. The words symbolize more than just being strong. They meant be prepared. Always think about your options. Stay one step ahead. All are the principles that define Dick Winters as a combat leader. 2 simple words.
You work together with the men in the field, and you love it. And this is where the men learn that in working together with you in the field, that they get the impression you know what you're doing, that you don't get lost in the woods at nighttime and make them put in extra miles that was not necessary, that you make the right decisions.
We idolized the man, and everybody would have followed Winters anywhere. If Winters had turned and said to us, well, we're going in somewhere and almost all of us are going to be killed, it wouldn't have mattered. We would have followed him, I'm sure.
He didn't, the man didn't holler at you. He just spoke soft and easy, told you what you wanted to do.
He had compassion for his people. They had respect for him. He was focused. He was aware of what the situation was and what was required to meet the problem. A really good leader.
It is in the heat of battle where men are tested individually and where relationships are cemented forever. An indescribable bond is created between brothers. Dick Winters was aware of this in Normandy on D-Day. It was a connection we as actors in the series tried to convey to the audience, yet unless you were truly there in Normandy, will always be hard to fully grasp.
And you find this philosophy, and you see it in action. The point that you said, you'll die for one another. Well, that's just, that's a figure of speech, really. But it's true statements. You think you can't take any more. You do take more. If you can take it, I can take it. And we do it together. And doing it together makes your band of brothers.
Dick Winters believed that compassion and humanity also had a role in war. Knowing when to flip the switch on and off defines a leader who is in control. Killing Germans is your mission, but what happens when your enemy surrenders? It is a good commander who sets the example to his men for what comes next.
We take care of him and make sure that he is not shot down. Of course, we had examples of people who didn't observe that. We found examples of this in the first few days in Normandy. And the examples of those that were guilty of this type of thing are people who are men who are trying to prove that they're killers.
In Normandy, France, decades after D-Day, well-positioned German bunkers look out from rocky cliffs. Enemy strongpoints point towards the English Channel. Waves lap at sandy shores where Allied soldiers traded their blood for the freedom of others. A Spitfire buzzes by on a June 6th anniversary, recalling a different time. Visitors to churches gaze upon stained glass windows, celebrating not saints, but paratroopers and liberators. Fields divided by ancient hedgerows still dominate the landscape. Normandy remains alive with scenes of D-Day decades after the fight moved through this part of France and on to Berlin. American boys still lie here under white crosses and stars of David. The passage of time means fewer and fewer World War II veterans come back now to raise the flag at the American cemetery or make their way to visit with old brothers who never came home. Time marches on, but memories are forever.
they were one of my buddies, one of my fellow soldiers, and we were kind of like a family in a way. They were just kids, really. Our whole regiment averaged 21 years old, I think, officers and men, and they never had a chance to have families and children of their own. It's sad. Sad.
On June 6th of every year, in the 11th century-old church in Saint-Marie-du-Mont, Easy Company's original objective on D-Day, a service in recognition of all the Allied invasion of Normandy is held. Bullet holes can still be seen on a nearby confessional. The fields surrounding the church were supposed to be the drop zones where E Company men were to land in the early morning hours of June 6th, delivered by C-47s, but we all know that plan went out the window when German anti-aircraft bullets started flying. Many of the men of Easy, including First Lieutenant Richard D. Winters, were dropped instead near another church in Saint-Mère-Église, about 5 miles away. As they made their way back towards Saint-Marie-du-Mont, they were given the task of taking out the guns at nearby Brécourt. It is here, in this setting during the passing of yet another June 6th anniversary in Normandy, that leadership on D-Day is being memorialized in bronze for generations to come. All the American Army divisions who took part in Operation Overlord will be honored. The residents of Normandy helped make this day a reality.
There's a passion, there's an involvement that the French have, and respect for the veterans that is just an amazing sight to see. And it's something that knowing that this is on their land and their homeland and things, they're just absolutely thrilled with the opportunity to have it here.
I am the parish priest of Saint-Marie-du-Mont and Saint-Mère-Église.
After the war, many of the soldiers who landed here would come back to Normandy and become honored guests of French families, welcomed as a son or brother would be, as was the case with Dick Winters and the de Valavier family at Brécourt.
Dear veteran friends and your families,
Roughly 1,000 people gather on a heavily overcast June 6th anniversary in Normandy. The weather is eerily similar to what the conditions were many decades ago on this exact day.
Leadership.
There are governors here, as well as mayors, generals, and foreign dignitaries. Local farmers and apple growers are here too. They journey to this spot, just off the main road from Saint-Marie-du-Mont to Utah Beach, the Route of Liberty they call it, to honor courage, initiative, and most importantly, leadership on D-Day. Men, women, and young children come to recognize men like Richard D. Winters.
The 1st 101st Airborne Division Commander, Major General Bill Lee, before they went into Normandy said, "We have no history, but we have a rendezvous with destiny." His words were very prophetic, and on 6 June 1944, right here at Normandy, the first pages of the 101st Airborne Division history were written by men like Dick Winters and the men that are sitting here today.
We will never forget, here at Saint-Marie-du-Mont and elsewhere upon the lands and cliffs and foothills, what storied men did to keep the story of freedom alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Richard D. Winters Leadership Monument recognizing all those who led the way on D-Day. There we go.
leadership is what Dick Winters wanted us to remember of him. What he wanted marked upon this statue with more prominence than his name, and what he wanted us to pay homage to in honoring the moments and makers of a valiant history.
Pour vous avoir rencontré quelquefois.
Having met you on certain occasions, your eyes, your smile, and your discretion were signs that characterize your convictions and your determination. This monument, erected in our commune, will be here to remind us that forgetfulness will not erase your memory.
Merci à vous, Major.
Thank you, Major, and also to your band of brothers from Easy Company.
The task given to sculptor Stephen Spears was to create a leadership monument to a man who would represent many hundreds of men. A memorial to a soldier who was humble and would only agree to be recognized if all those in every other American Army divisions who took part on D-Day were as well.
First of all, you want to be sure and make him happy with what it is. You want his family, you want everyone involved to be able to be comfortable with what it is you're portraying. At the same time, finding little ways to be able to make sure people know who this man is. The Screaming Eagle on his arm patch, his name on the jacket. Those are important things, but they have to be subtle in the way that they come out, and yet give the strength and character of who this man was. So I was thrilled just with the opportunity to be able to do something to portray this man. I just wish he could have been there to see it.
For me, in portraying Dick Winters, the challenge lay in understanding the man himself, who, while humble, was always in control of the situations which surrounded him. There was a quiet confidence about Dick, and he was guarded with his thoughts. But what was obvious from the first time we met was how his leadership principles contributed to the overall well-being of his men.
I don't want to take from the men. I want the men to feel that I'm giving to them, that I'm there when they need help, when they need advice. I'm there to make sure that they're treated fairly.
It was Normandy and its people who donated this land and wanted this day. But in reality, this area was as important to Richard D. Winters as it is to the French. For it was here he was first tested in battle and displayed all the characteristics that would make him an exceptional combat leader in World War II. The foundation of the Richard D. Winters Leadership Monument speaks to the importance of its surroundings.
We're in such a beautiful region. It has such history, and the buildings, the architecture, the stonework and things. I thought it would be so perfect in the fact that these are airborne guys. They dropped into the middle of everything here. So what better landing spot for him to be on than the natural stone from here in the region? And to have it complement the shape and the direction of the bronze itself seemed ideal with the three granite panels that give the information with his quote.
A quote which does not glorify war, but honors those who responded when called upon.
He didn't want anything to actually portray him, and I think that this is about all of the units. It's about the character and the strength of leadership.
The discs at the top of the pedestal of the Leadership Monument recognize all the American Army divisions and corps who jumped behind the hedgerows, landed on the beaches, and climbed steep cliffs in the opening moments of the liberation of Western Europe. They will be here in bronze, forever representing all leadership on D-Day.
The one unit that you don't see in those discs around the outside is the 101st, and that's where he's that one disc in the middle, dropping right into the heart of everything.
En échange,
through exchanges and emails, I promised him that it would be placed exactly on that site. And to keep your word to a man like that, it's an honor.
Thanks to the French in donating that land, it enables a location for people to want to have the opportunity to come to this area and to see so much of where that story started. The first time I saw it in place, I was very happy with the feeling of seeing how it looked with the horizon and Utah Beach in the background, and the sky in the background and the fields around him. It just seems to be the perfect place for him to be there for generations to come.
Over time, this monument will age as the men of D-Day have done, quietly, with dignity and grace.
And probably one of the greatest compliments that I've received was from Charles, who is the owner of the Utah Beach Museum, who had met Richard Winters many times. He came up to me at the dedication and said, "You've caught his expression. You have that feeling in his face." That's what I need to hear. And every year, every anniversary, there will be people bringing those flowers and setting them down in tribute to what they've done here.
J'ai eu la chance de rencontrer Dick Winters. I've had the chance to meet Dick Winters many times. The visit which marked me the most was his last in 2001 for the premiere of Band of Brothers at Utah Beach. We spent a great deal of time together, and alone he retraced the path he used in the taking of the cannons of Brecourt. His face had the most intense of expressions. After the ceremonies, before leaving, I offered him a medal made specially for the occasion. He refused it. From his pocket, he produced a well-worn-out medal, which my father had given him 30 years before. He said that he always kept it with him, and that it was his good luck charm. I was so moved.
Richard D. Winters was one of World War II's finest combat leaders, and in Normandy has become a part of the fabric of this historic region. It is an honor for me to share with the world his story of leadership, courage, and valor on D-Day and in World War II. As the leadership statue bearing his name and likeness settles in overlooking Utah Beach and in sight of Brecourt Manor and Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, it casts a determined glare across the field where Dick Winters first instilled in his band of brothers the words his men would hear during some of the most difficult and challenging times of the war in Europe. Hang tough.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the dedication of the Richard Winters Leadership Monument. My name is Tim Gray. I'm chairman of the World War II Foundation. First, let me say we welcome all those who have come across the pond, as they like to say, from America on this very important day. We are also very happy to be joined by so many of our friends from France, both young and old, and as well as those from across Europe who have made the trek today. We are also fortunate to be hosting so many important dignitaries on the 68th anniversary of D-Day, both from the United States and from the French Republic. Today we have mayors, governors, and major generals gathered. Our biggest welcome today, however, is reserved for the veterans of D-Day and World War II. It goes without saying that you in the front row are the reason we are able to gather in public places such as this and enjoy the freedom this monument represents. We thank you. We thank you and cannot thank you enough for what you did on these shores and across Europe and in the Pacific in World War II. Would all veterans of World War II in attendance here today please stand and be recognized? This project has been 2.5 years in the making and has the blessing of the late Richard D. Winters. It has his approval because this statue we are about to unveil, while utilizing his likeness and a quote from him, represents all those who led the way on D-Day. It does not represent just a man, but many men. It does not represent just one individual company, but rather many companies, regiments, and battalions. The Richard Winters Leadership Monument does not recognize just one specific division as well, but rather all the American Army divisions who fought on the beaches and in the hedgerows and villages of Normandy on June 6th of 1944. The man depicted on this monument is today one of the best-known leaders of World War II, thanks in part to the power of words and of film. He didn't lobby for the role, it was just handed to him. Richard Winters handled his newfound recognition later in his life the way he led his men in combat in Normandy and other areas of Europe, with dignity, compassion, and strength of body, mind, and character. His story does not need to be repeated today. We all know it. We know why this place is special and why this monument is here, and this particular soldier sits atop it. We see the flagpoles of Brecourt Manor, the church steeple of St. Marie du Mont, Carentan is nearby, and we see the shores of Utah Beach. Richard Winters would not want us to make a big deal out of this. We don't have bands playing today. There are no balloons, no parades, or fireworks. That is not who he was before or after he became one of the most recognizable leaders of World War II. A book and a television series made him a public hero, but like all the men of World War II, he will tell you the real heroes are the men who never came home. So keeping with the late Major's wishes, we are not making this all about him. It's really all about the men in the front row and the men who never came home. The statue may be symbolic of one man in particular who is an exceptionally good leader on D-Day and one of America's most respected soldiers in the war, but there were many leaders on June 6, 1944. We unfortunately have never heard many of these stories because the men who fought in the wars and fought in these battles never came home. And because of these important sacrifices that they made, they never made it back to America and still lie under the white crosses and stars of David in the American cemetery a short distance from here. Dick Winters agreed to lend us his likeness in a pose that represents leadership in combat, while also allowing us to use one of his most important quotes regarding men who fight. But make no mistake about it, this is not a monument to one man or his rank at the beginning or end of the war. This, in the end, is a monument to many men and the leadership they displayed on D-Day. That is the way he wanted it, and we have honored his wishes today. We are honoring a man, but not losing sight of the fact that many Americans led the way in Normandy from Utah to Omaha Beach, as well as inland in the Bocage and at the cliffs of Point to Hawk. Men such as James Earl Rudder, Norman Dutch Cota, Jim Gavin, Joseph Dawson, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., Carlton Barrett, John Pinder, and Jimmy Monteith. This anniversary is also about soldiers named Don Burgett and Jack Port, men who are here with us today and who in their own way led from the front and battled in this very area of Normandy 68 years ago. We are also very proud to have two men here who served with Dick Winters, Mr. Herb Seworth and Mr. Al Mamprey in the front row. Al is an original Toccoa man. In reality, every American Army soldier who fought here in Normandy became a leader of sorts, armed with guns and grenades, but also with courage, determination, and especially initiative. Today is about honoring him, yes, and hearing more about the man atop our leadership monument, because frankly, he deserves it, but also honoring them as well, because they too deserve it. They wore different patches, but they still were a very, very important part of what happened here on June 6, 1944. Our first guest speaker today is the former governor of Dick Winters' home state of Pennsylvania, and also the first ever Secretary of Homeland Security of the United States of America. He has been a friend to this project from its earliest stages. Please welcome the Honorable Tom Ridge.
Thank you, Tim. Distinguished guests all, ladies and gentlemen. It was at the twilight of D-Day, with a historic day of battle behind him and more to go ahead of him, with but a pause to take as the enemy lay in the distance, that the leader of Easy Company bent upon the ground to catch a few hours of sleep. He would later write, "Before I dozed off, I did not forget to get on my knees and thank God for helping me to live through this day and ask for his help on D+1. He wrote, "I would live this war one day at a time, and I promised myself that if I survived, I would find a small farm somewhere in the Pennsylvania countryside and spend the remainder of my life in quiet and peace." Happy and proud are we who also called Pennsylvania home, that Major Dick Winters finally found his quiet and his peace in our Commonwealth, where America's founders declared liberty, the very liberty that Major Winters and many more fought so hard to protect. As he used to say, there were many Dick Winters in this war. All are deserving of bronze and glory upon a pedestal, and the tributes we bring to this ceremony today. I am enormously honored to stand before many of those veterans who are with us in our audience this morning, and the many whose good souls are all around us, cherished among these outstretched lands and the heavens above. Leadership. Leadership is what Dick Winters wanted us to remember of him. What he wanted marked upon this statue with more prominence than his name, and what he wanted us to pay homage to in honoring the moments and makers of a valiant history. That history includes the names and faces that rose above anyone's highest expectations of what was possible in battle. It includes those who led the assault on Utah Beach, who parachuted behind enemy lines and fought valiantly across France and Holland and throughout Europe to defeat Hitler's armies. It includes the men who fell behind, the men who gave all of themselves so that one day those who once stood upon the same ground that Dick Winters once prayed would do so with the comfort of freedom under their feet. And so it is. Despite fresh challenges to peace, the lands upon which Dick Winters fought are today nations at peace. Former enemies have become allies. And we look upon it all and know that a generation of heroes made all the difference in the world. And so today, we too hope to make a difference. We dedicate a monument to the leadership of noble men who, after battle, became quiet men, who did not dwell on their experiences, but drew from them. Humility is the hat they prefer to wear, but pride in them is the banner that we wave. War is uneasy, it scars, and it hurts. It has a place, but that place is brutally hard. But to his men and to a generation, to all of us, hang tough, Major Winters said. Hang tough. And hang tough we did, and hang tough we have, but we will never forget the great leaders who showed us the way. We will never cast aside, never diminish, never forget those humble soldiers, nor those who never return to feel the outstretched arms of family welcoming them home. We will never forget, here at Sainte Marie du Mont and elsewhere upon the lands and cliffs and foothills, what storied men did to keep the story of freedom alive. Blessed are the men of Easy Company, that band of brothers. Blessed are the veterans of D-Day, of World War II, of all of those who served with such spirit and devotion. For today, thanks to these good soldiers and good souls, we are all citizens of strong, free, and great nations. Out of the difficulties of battle, out of centuries of conflict and even peace, we have learned liberty is not an ideal, it is an indivisible cause. And so upon this hallowed land, we honor those who upheld that cause. To Major Dick Winters, to the men of Easy Company, to the men and women of World War II veterans all, we salute you and we thank you.
Our next speaker is the Mayor of Sainte Marie du Mont and another true friend of the Winters Leadership Project. Mayor Henri Millet has been very enthusiastic about this monument from the beginning, even in helping to choose the very location we are celebrating today, the monument right here. Please welcome the Honorable Henri Millet, Mayor of Sainte Marie du Mont.
Le maire de Sainte Marie du Mont, Monsieur Henri Millet.
Dear veterans, chers amis vétérans, messieurs et mesdames les élus,
Major Richard Winters, you were born in 1918, and we learned of your passing on January 2nd, 2011. You were an officer of the American Army, and you led in the renowned Easy Company of the 101st Airborne Division. I leave the description of your exploits to those who have known you better than I, notably Monsieur Charles de Valavier, whom with his father, our previous mayor of Sainte Marie du Mont, have spent so many hours with you. You were parachuted on our land during the night of June 5th, and with your competence, courage, your analytical spirit, and your sense of responsibility, you have written an essential page of the story of our liberation. Having met you on certain occasions, your eyes, your smile, and your discretion were signs that characterize your convictions and your determination. This monument, erected in our commune, will be here to remind us that forgetfulness will not erase your memory. Thank you, Major, and also to your band of brothers from Easy Company. Thank you, members of the Foundation, who have brought us this beautiful project that we receive with honor and pride. Thank you to those who have realized this beautiful sculpture. And thanks to you who have come to honor the memory of a man who by his actions was a key to the success of the landings on the beautiful Utah beach. Thank you.
The 101st Airborne Division has a very proud history dating back to June 6, 1944, when the Screaming Eagles began falling from these very skies in Normandy. The 101 went on the jump into Holland in Operation Market Garden and, of course, became a part of history with their heroic defense of Bastogne in the winter of 1944 and 45 in the Battle of the Bulge. Since World War II, the 101st Airborne has defended freedom in every corner of the world on behalf of a very grateful United States of America, including recent heroic action in Afghanistan. We are very, very proud today to have the 101st Airborne's commanding general with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Major General James McConville, commander of the 101st Airborne Division.
You know, we were here yesterday and it was pouring rain. And so we are very blessed that General Dwight Eisenhower decided to move the day to today because history does tend to repeat itself. Distinguished guests, fellow Screaming Eagles, especially veterans from World War II, and especially the men of Easy Company that have done so much for our great division. It's truly a privilege to be here today representing the 23,000 soldiers of the present 101st Airborne Division as we honor one of our great heroes of our Army in the 101st Airborne Division, Major Dick Winters. In fact, we honor all of our World War II heroes. The 1st 101st Airborne Division Commander, Major General Bill Lee, before they went into Normandy said, "We have no history, but we have a rendezvous with destiny." His words were very prophetic, and on 6 June 1944, right here at Normandy, the first pages of the 101st Airborne Division history were written by men like Dick Winters and the men that are sitting here today. They have established a legacy that all Screaming Eagles who have followed have strived to live up to each and every day. And on that morning of 6 June, as we all know, they crossed the English Channel and they encountered heavy clouds, and these are not the original clouds. And they encountered fierce anti-aircraft fire, and many were dropped away from their drop zones and required to take the initiative and to fend for themselves, and in that they did. By seizing the initiative and taking great leadership, those young paratroopers saved countless lives that day. The heroism of these young soldiers became legendary, and they established the foundation of what would be known as America's greatest generation. Thankfully, historians have recorded their history, and fortunately, generous donors have built monuments to honor their history, and luckily, filmmakers and movie makers have captured their history so a current generation of Americans, in fact the globe, can understand what these great men did in defense of our freedom and national security. Since 1944, Screaming Eagle soldiers have been answering their nation's call and will continue to do so. And the men of World War II can sleep well at night, knowing that young men and women continue to step forward, willing to sacrifice all so others might enjoy freedom and prosperity. They carry the torch of freedom lit by you, and every day they strive up to live to that legacy that you have left them. And so as we pause on this day and reflect, we reflect on the proud history of the heroic men that served here in defense of freedom. We honor those who have given so much, and we give thanks to those who continue to serve. May God bless you and all our Screaming Eagle soldiers and those who continue to go forth into harm's way to make this place and this world a better place to live. Airborne, Air Assault.
Our next speaker has a true understanding of the leadership skills of Major Winters on D-Day, who was then, of course, Lieutenant Winters. That's because the famous Battle of Brecourt Manor took place on his family's farm. His father, Michel, was accidentally wounded by American troops in the chaotic fight to take out 4 German 105mm guns that were pounding Utah Beach, a successful mission led by Dick Winters that earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. 20 years after the war, Michel de Vallevier started a museum honoring American troops on D-Day. The Utah Beach Museum is one of the finest in Normandy and now run by his son Charles, a lifelong friend of Dick Winters. the first deputy mayor of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, and the owner of the museum itself, which just this year is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Charles de Vallevier.
Chers amis vétérans et vos familles.
Dear veteran friends and your families, ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely proud to have here this new leadership monument. May all those who contributed to the realization of this project receive our deepest gratitude. This site is well chosen, as we can see the ocean and the land on which the men of Easy Company have fought. This monument is full of symbols. The stones from the Cotentin have been used for its base, and this beautiful statue, which comes from the United States, bears an expression on its face which is quite well realized. I've had the chance to meet Dick Winters many times. The visit which marked me the most was his last in 2001 for the premiere of Band of Brothers at Utah Beach. We spent a great deal of time together, and alone he retraced the path he used in the taking of the cannons of Brécourt. His face had the most intense of expressions. After the ceremonies, before leaving, I offered him a medal made specially for the occasion. He refused it. From his pocket, he produced a well-worn-out medal, which my father had given him 30 years before. He said that he always kept it with him, and that it was his good luck charm. I was so moved. I know that this monument will know a magnificent success. Dick Winters' story is known the world over. What touches the visitor is that he led by example. In discovering this story, we also give homage to the ensemble of our liberators. We are forever grateful to you. Thank you.
Unfortunately, our next speaker could not be with us today due to important business at home, but he is an important member of this effort, both as a donor and a board member of the World War II Foundation. Curt Schilling is a very famous American baseball player who won 3 World Series championships. He was very much looking forward to this event, which recognizes leadership on D-Day, and one of his true heroes, Richard D. Winters. Curt asked me to read the following statement on his behalf. It is with great sorrow that I penned this letter, letting you know I cannot join you on this most important day. Major Richard Winters, in the words of my father, a soft-spoken Pennsylvania native himself, as well as a screaming eagle of the 101st Airborne, was, in his own words regarding Major Winters, one of God's good people. May God bless all these heroes, those standing and those long since fallen, and may God bless the United States of America. Our next speaker is a frequent visitor to Normandy and has been a true champion of everything surrounding this project. He has a deep love for the region and the Norman people. He calls this his favorite place on earth. We all feel that way. Mr. David Alfonso has not only donated to this project financially, but also has provided sound advice throughout this entire process. He has been, without a doubt, someone the Foundation has been able to count on the past 2.5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David F. Alfonso.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and absolutely the veterans of World War II. It is indeed a special day as we unveil a monument that is focused on those who served in an Army leadership capacity during the Normandy campaign. And although many factors played into the ultimate success of D-Day and those that followed, a critical element that drove that success was the leadership on the front lines. It is fitting that this monument feature then First Lieutenant Dick Winters as he was on June 6, 1944, and as per his wishes, this monument is focused on all Army junior officers. We should also mention today the efforts of the NCOs, since together with the junior officers both displayed an unwavering courage to lead men into battle without question. It was their leadership capabilities that inspired and drove the men around them to always press forward, never give up, and overcome all adversity. This very leadership ultimately proved to be one of the most powerful weapons on the battlefield. This happens to be my 9th trip to Normandy, and on every visit, I'm always left with an overwhelming level of respect for the Norman residents. They have taken the sense of duty for remembering to a level unlike anything I have witnessed throughout my travels in Europe. Thank you for the reverence that you display to the World War II veterans. Thank you for flying the American flags and the Allied flags at your homes and businesses. Thank you for always making us feel so welcomed, and thank you for always promoting and caring for the many monuments and memorials throughout Normandy. Being here on Causeway number 2 and trying to picture what happened here always leaves me inspired by the courage and the sacrifice of men that jumped out of planes, followed by those who landed on the beaches exactly 68 years ago today. Without exception, every time I have asked a veteran how it was that they could find a strength to constantly push forward under the most horrific conditions, they'd always say, we were just doing our job, or we didn't want to let our buddies down. A few weeks ago, I spoke with Bill Garnier, who received the Silver Star for his efforts at Brecourt Manor. We spoke about today and what he would say if he were here, and he first said, tell him I thought Winters was a Quaker. He explained that prior to June 6, he was afraid. He was afraid that Winters wouldn't fight or effectively lead men into battle. Bill went on to say, I was wrong. He wasn't a Quaker. He's probably a Mennonite. But he was a real leader, and I would follow him anywhere. He was the best in the world. There are countless examples of this type of leadership, and for a moment, let's reflect on a few. Like the leadership of Roy Creek as he led his men to secure and hold the bridge at Chef DuPont, or the leadership of George Kirshner as he led his men to scale the cliffs at Pointe du Hoc, or the leadership of Ralph Goranson as he pushed his men up the bluffs on Omaha Beach, or the leadership of Bob Ray as he led his men and led the charge across the bridge at Lafayette. To all World War II veterans, thank you. Thank you for inspiring us. It is truly because of you that we're able to stand here today. And to the citizens of Ste. Marie du Mont, thank you for providing this piece of sacred land so that future generations who will have the privilege to stand where we stand today can marvel at the image of one of many brave leaders who led the charge to liberate this beautiful country and the world. Thank you.
It is with great honor I now introduce the president of the Men of Easy Company Association, Mr. Herb Seward.
I first want to apologize to all you 82nd and 1st Division and all the rest of you who landed. You know, Easy Company was only one of 1,000 rifle companies. We were good, we were confident, but we had 990 other rifle companies that were just as good. This is about Dick Winters this morning. I think he would be almost overwhelmed and humbled and dismayed at the crowd, and because he was not that kind of a guy. He was a very humble, simple fellow, and he was thrust into a position of leadership that he excelled in. And as one of our vets wrote home to his mother when Dick was appointed as company commander, he said, "Mother, we now have a company commander that we can lead, that can lead us to hell." All of us have the ability to develop our leadership skills. Some do it better than others. Dick excelled at it. One of the other veterans of the Battle of Normandy said to me just recently, Dick was seriously wounded in Carentan but kept going. That's what I call leadership. Another one said to me, I never saw him make a tactical error in the field. There are many other stories. I won't expound on them. I know that everyone is cold, and I'm deeply honored and humbled today to be here As one of the youngest men, I guess that's one of the reasons I ended up to be president. They figured I might outlive all of them. There are only 19 of us left. I know they would all be here today if they could. And as Bill Gardner recently said to me when he promised to come to our next reunion, he said, "I'll push, pull, or drag myself there." Thank you for your respect for what happened here so many years ago. Thanks again.
Major Winters graduated from F&M with a degree in business. We are honored to have the president of Franklin and Marshall here today to speak about one of the school's most famous alumni. Please welcome the president of Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Dick Winters' alma mater, President Daniel Porterfield.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you to our French hosts, to all distinguished visitors who've gathered here today, especially to the veterans, their families, their wives, their widows. A child of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Dick Winters attended a college inspired by the examples of the American founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin and John Marshall. And because of that education, he was able to show on this hallowed ground that all can become great because all can serve. A son of Franklin and Marshall College, Dick Winters carried one defining lesson into the crucible of history in Europe. As captured in a biography of Major Winters, he determined to go out every day and do the best he could in everything he tried. He considered that the most important lesson of his Franklin and Marshall education. Together, the Easy Company and all who sacrificed in World War II showed the world that America shares democracy and that in the name of civilization, good must confront evil. Dick Winters was remarkable and he was representative. He was one man and he was every man. To celebrate his life and to share its meaning, Franklin and Marshall College announces today the creation of a new honor, the Major Dick Winters Award for Perseverance and Leadership. We will recognize one of our undergraduates each year who demonstrates the greatest determination and strength of character with this honor. Saving freedom is not the work of one time, but of all time. In Dick Winters' name, we will teach that lesson to our students. We will remember his lesson. Go out every day and do the best you can in all that you try. Thank you.
Thank you, President Porterfield. Today's ceremony would not have happened without the corporate support of our sponsor, Circuit USA. They did not hesitate when presented with the opportunity to be involved with the Leadership Dedication Program. We cannot thank Trey Harris, Randy Webb, and their team enough for honoring the men and women of World War II and their total enthusiasm for this initiative. Please welcome the President of Circuit USA, Mr. Trey Harris.
General McConville, Governor Ridge, Mayor Millet, Mr. DeValivier, Mr. Gray, distinguished guests, and of course, most importantly, veterans of 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, Herb Surth, and my friend Al Manfrey. My name is Trey Harris with Circuit. Circuit is an innovator and manufacturer of high-performance protective apparel, specialized uniform systems for American and NATO armed forces. To say that we are humbled to be a part of this memorial dedication is an understatement. Memorials of this order are essential to making sure that we not only remember the lessons of heroism, honor, and sacrifice learned from World War II, but we are also able to pass those lessons on to future generations. Operation Overlord was perhaps the single most consequential operation in the history of conflict. It is not an overstatement to say that the ultimate success of the operation is why we stand here today as free men and women. The success of Operation Overlord demanded uncompromising leadership in its principles, its preparation, and its execution. There can be no more quintessential example of utterly competent, uncompromising leadership than that exhibited by Major Winters. 68 years ago today, Allied expeditionary forces landed on this French coast. Among them a young First Lieutenant Winters and the men of Company E, 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne. What these landing forces needed on that fateful day and the many long days that followed was a courageous audacity. And a courageous audacity is exactly what was instilled and continually reinforced by Major Winters. From the preparation of Easy Company at Camp Toccoa, Georgia, to Alborn, England, to the nighttime airborne insertion near here at approximately 1:14 a.m., right on through to Berchtesgaden in the German Alps in the spring of 1945. Major Winters' intrepid leadership, by example, and from the front was ever present. On September the 22nd, 1944, in support of Operation Market Garden, then Captain Richard Winters climbed to the top of a church steeple in Uden, Holland, on Hell's Highway. He quickly realized that German forces were amassing on all sides of their position. Undaunted, Winters gathered his men and calmly professed, "Men, there's nothing to get excited about. The situation is normal. We are surrounded." Captain Winters quickly organized a highly competent counterattack, and the Germans were repulsed. An unflappable leader. Unflappable in his actions and uncompromising in his leadership, it is inevitable that a courageous audacity was engendered in his men. Anything less would have been lethally insufficient. And so we stand here today, free women and men. Thank you, Major Winters. Thank you, leaders. Thank you, veterans. Thanks to Tim Gray, the World War II Federation, Mr. Stephen Spears, Jordan, and all who made this monument possible. God bless.
Our final speaker today is also our youngest. What else really can you say about Jordan Brown that hasn't already been said on TV, radio, or in print? Jordan read about our effort to honor Major Winters and took a special interest since the Major lived close by to his own home in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, just minutes away, in fact. Richard Winters is a hero to many people in this audience, and Jordan, however, decided he would take it a step further, and through various initiatives and help from others in his family, and with the support of the local and global World War II community, Jordan led a team effort that resulted in the collection of $100,000 for this very monument. Ladies and gentlemen, the unflappable Jordan Brown.
Bonjour. Je m'appelle Jordan Brown. Hello. My name is Jordan Brown. Thank you for inviting me here today. I really want to thank Tim Gray for his hard work to get this monument built to remember everyone who served here on D-Day. 68 years ago, right here where we are standing, things looked very different. American soldiers had just entered into World War II, and they landed on the beaches of Normandy to free the world from the Germans. If we had not won that war, this world would be very different. World War II would determine whether we would continue to be free or if we would be ruled by others. The soldiers who landed here were from a different country. They spoke a different language. They had different customs. They gave their lives to make sure that evil would be conquered and freedom would prevail. More than 4,000 Allied troops died in Normandy on June 6, 1944. That was 4,000 men who would never get to have families, children, and grandchildren. That was 4,000 mothers and fathers and countless brothers and sisters who lost when they loved here on June 6, 1944. More than 50,000 Allied forces died during the entire Battle of Normandy. It is hard to imagine what they saw here in Normandy, but they knew that they had to be courageous in order to win. Courage is not the absence of fear, but knowing that there's something else more important than fear. Those brave men did what was right and gave the world's children the gift of freedom. It took incredible leadership to make sure that their mission was accomplished. Some men had to take charge because their leaders died on D-Day. One of those men was Major Dick Winters. Major Winters is my hero. When I learned that this monument was going to look like him, I knew I wanted to be part of it. And here I am. I gave out these wristbands that say "Hang Tough." Those words were inspired by Major Winters, but I'll tell you that story later. These wristbands and donations from other events helped me raise more than $99,000, and that money helped build this monument. Now, I was 11 when I started this project. Now, I'm 13. I've been asked why Major Winters is my hero. There are many reasons. Yes, he successfully led his band of brothers, but there are other things he did that made him my hero. He always led his troops from the front. He was always honest with his men, and therefore they trusted him. He never thought of himself as anything special, not even after the war. Not even after the book Band of Brothers came out. Not even after the miniseries brought him fame. He remained humble. He always remembered his brothers. 66 years later, when he was approached about building this monument, he only agreed to let it look like him if it were dedicated to all who served here on D-Day. After 66 years, he was still just as humble. He was still teaching us how to lead and how to live. And now, here's the story I promised you. Major Winters made famous the words "Hang Tough." He told these words to his paratroopers when they landed on D-Day. He said these words when the fighting got tough. These were the words he would continue to tell people after the war. When he signed things, he would add the words "Hang Tough." To me, hang tough means to hold on, to keep going even when things get hard, to never give up until you reach your goal. They inspire me. The words were first used in combat, but with two simple words, he taught us all how to live. Today, we stand here honoring all of the men who served here on D-Day. Without their courage, life would be very different. Many of them have died, including Major Winters, but their lessons of leadership, humbleness, and inspiring words like "Hang Tough" still teach us how to live a good life. Thank you again for inviting me here today. I will never forget today or the men that fought here 68 years ago. Today, the courage of these brave men will be forever remembered. Thank you.
There are a few other people in today's crowd who made this day happen, and I'd like to briefly thank them for their contributions, especially Mr. George Les Jr., Mr. Ross Owen, who's not here, Rima and Francois Hébert, owners of the beautiful Churchill and Villa Lara hotels in Bayeux, Mr. Benoit Noel, who is, he's right there. But if you need a job completed, you ask Benoit, and there's 101% chance that it will be completed. He's been tremendous. And Miss Isabelle Attard and her tremendous staff at the Utah Beach Museum. Thank you as well to Miss Christelle Zuccolano for all your efforts here in France, as well as those of your school kids. And thanks to Kelly Ann Sproul for today's beautiful music. Additional thank yous to Mr. Joe Mucha, Mr. Paul Woodage, Mr. Edward Robinson, Mr. Paul Clifford, Mr. Jim Karpachik, Mr. Brian Youse, Mr. Jake Powers, Mr. and Mrs. Rob Brown, parents of Jordan, and Tom Colonis and my lovely wife Sheila as well. And thank you to Band of Brothers actors James Matteo, Ross McCall, Michael Cudlitz, and Frank John Hughes for their support of this project the past couple of years. A special thank you to Easy Company veterans Bill Garnier, Babe Heffron, Ed Tipper, Brad Freeman, and the late Buck Compton for being true friends of this project. Finally, I saved a very important thank you for last, because without the artistic talent of this individual, we would not be here today ready to dedicate this monument. I would like to thank my friend, Stephen Spears. Steve is the sculptor of this beautiful monument and has also sculpted the United States Navy Monument, which is right down the road here at the Utah Beach Museum, and the 1st Infantry Division Doughboy Monument in Cantigny, France. To Steve, thank you for everything you have done to honor these heroes. I know you put your heart and soul into every project, and especially this one, and it certainly shows. So thank you, my friend. I'd like Steve to stand and please be recognized. It is now time to unveil the Leadership Monument. If Governor Ridge, Major General McConville, Mayor Millay, and Charles could please head over down the stairs and around to the parachute. They will have the honor of taking the parachute off of the statue today. We're helped today with some guys from the United States Air Force as well. We thank them for coming. Benoit is giving them last-second instructions on how to remove a parachute from a monument, which isn't done too often. So Governor Ridge and General McConville, and if all of you would grab a portion of that parachute. Ladies and gentlemen, the Richard D. Winters Leadership Monument, recognizing all those who led the way on D-Day. There we go.
a World War II veteran by the
We dedicate a monument to the leadership of noble
We
men.
reflect on the proud history of the heroic men that served here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Richard D. Winters Leadership Monument recognizing all those who led the way on D-Day.